All right, well, welcome everyone. So I will try to do my best hosting this session. I guess this has started all from last year at the Learning Planet when we were presenting the Suvemäe movie that I will briefly touch upon. But as we had screened that movie last year, we thought that for this year's session, we would focus a little bit more, maybe talking about um, presenting a little bit QUEST and specifically the desk project that I will get a little bit more into, and we can show you a bit of a intro presentation video about the desk project and different project results that might be useful. And then introducing Derry and Charlie, and then passing the floor on to them for a very interesting discussion. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen in order to present a little bit QUEST and introduce the different things. Let's see. Enter full screen. Right, is that sharing correctly? Fantastic. Okay, so just a few words about QUEST. So QUEST, we are an organization. We started out as a forest school in 2017, and then we shifted into a democratic school. And then a few years later, we turned into a European network organization in order to support other schools and to focus more on research projects and also on doing some policy work. As we understood, we could have a greater impact by working that way. We have a team of young, motivated individuals here based in Brussels. And so QUEST stands for Quality Education in Europe for Sustainable Social Transformation. We have about 80 members. Our mission is connecting European educational organizations to promote children agency and rights via democratic, inclusive and sustainable education. We focus on 3 pillars: democratic education, inclusive education, and sustainable education. Our strategy: advocating, connecting, and doing project-based research. I'm just going to skip through because what I would like to talk about more is what comes after. We do quite a number of European-funded research projects, and we have about 12 running right now. But the most important one that I would like to talk about today is the DESK project. The DESK project, which stands for Democratic Education in Schools, is quite a large European-funded project. So the first European-funded project for supporting democratic education. And so what the project is about is having in 5 countries, each time, 1 democratic school and 1 public school. And what the project is trying to achieve is to create a dialogue, a bridge between public schools and democratic schools in order to support democratic schools in gaining legitimacy, but also in being able to see with public schools where they are at on the scale of democratic education and practices, and to be able to see then how we can shift their practices on a scale so that they can move slowly towards integrating more democratic practices in their programs, in their classrooms. So this is quite a large project, a 3-year project, and with a number of project results that are quite interesting and that are all for free and that you can find on the QUEST website. And one of the main project results is a free training in democratic education for teachers. And so what I'm going to do is just screen a video. And I think now Sarah is going to take over the screen in order to, so I'm going to stop sharing And then,
just a second.
yeah.
And the first.
And on there, you're going to see the main project partners from this project speaking, starting with Martina, which is the coordinator at QUEST.
If they can just confirm.
Yes, I can see your screen, Sarah. And you can large screen.
This project is an European project funded by the Erasmus Plus framework. It means democratic education in school, and it encompasses 10 partners, among which state school, democratic school, school networks, and university. The objective is to bring the European framework of life competences and citizenship competence into action in school by empowering teachers with a new methodology taken by the democratic education approach, meaning that we look at self-directed learning and shared management of the schools in order to be able to equip students with the skill needed in the 21st century's challenges.
Ahora mismo estamos en la primera fase. En esta fase detectamos las necesidades de formación que tiene el profesorado sobre precisamente los valores democráticos en la escuela. A partir de ahí pasamos al objetivo 2, que es el diseño de un plan de formación para profesorado en esta línea. La fase 3 es la promoción del proyecto mediante audiovisuales, webs y visibilización del proyecto. Y por último, la fase 4 es la elaboración de unas guías de recomendación para el profesorado que les ayude a fomentar los valores democráticos en sus escuelas de infantil, primaria y secundaria.
This desk project is an incredible opportunity because we are getting support by the European Union to find really an area of intersection between public education and democratic education. And today, everybody can recognize that a huge change is needed in the education system in order to face the 21st century challenges. And so we have an incredible opportunity here to do groundbreaking work in order to push forward the whole public education system and also to gain more recognition for the current democratic schools so that they can continue their work and continue expanding.
To be a democratic school, it means to provide the space for children to explore themselves, to get to know themselves, to get to know their strengths, their talents, their limitations, and to provide the support that is needed for them to develop their fullest potential, to learn to make choices, to take decisions, to deal with freedom and to take responsibility for their life.
We see many positive effects. At first, to increase their well-being and their engagement, also to build up some self-confidence by children, to increase also the processing in their taking their process in their own hands, to let them participate to processes to make decisions and to increase competences in that way, also socio-emotional competence. I think we will get less resistance and so a greater support by involving everyone in that process. It will make us also to learn the talents from each other and to engage those talents at the right moment. And we see it also as a fact to get to the targets that we have to get in state school.
Those teachers who want to initiate democratic approach in their schools, in their everyday work, I would recommend, for one thing, to listen to their students, to be interested what they are interested in, and practice circles where everybody can talk safely and express their interests, their needs, and joys and worries. And one thing I would recommend once more, is that to step down from the chair of authority and be more equal with the students, to investigate in different subjects as equal and as a partner, not as an authority, because that gives a lot of space and openness, and you might even learn yourself something that you didn't know.
For Italian State School, DESC is an important project to improve our stay at school. A good way to know new approach to spending our class and increase good relationship with pupils. Thank you.
We believe DESC project is important because in the state schools in Brussels we want to encourage our pupils to engage in their own learning process. And we believe we can learn from democratic education principles how to support these evolutions as teachers and school managers.
Y bueno, y le voy a contestar que es una escuela donde los niños pueden escoger lo que quieran estudiar, una escuela que vive adentro de la naturaleza y donde maestros y estudiantes están en el mismo nivel, donde no está una jerarquía y donde para todos la maestra es la naturaleza y vamos aprendiendo desde ella. Nosotros no creemos de saber lo que es mejor para los niños y creemos que expresar la unicidad de cada uno de nosotros es la esencia de la educación. Intentamos de hacerlo nosotros como maestros y los niños, de ayudar a los niños a hacerlo. Y nada, eso es. Nosotros estamos intentando de cambiar pasito a pasito la forma educativa que tenemos ahora, para darle vida otra vez y para que la escuela pueda ser un lugar donde aprendemos a vivir, a estar juntos, a cooperar entre nosotros y a ser felices.
Is a school in the beach possible? Yes, it is, and it's necessary, because children need nature for healthy development. So let's take children back to nature.
All right, so I don't know if everybody could see this video in a fluid manner. And let's see if maybe the sound can be pulled out there. Yeah. And 1 second, yeah. No. Okay. Charlie, you were advising that we put also the 3-minute little video presenting specifically the training produced by DESC. Is that what do you think?
I would suggest that we can do this later.
You are muted.
After. No, I'm not.
No, now you're good. Yeah, sorry.
We could do that in the end, perhaps before getting into the conversation as a provocation.
Yes. So I'm just gonna continue just 2 more minutes on the presentation. So with the desk project, while we were in the process, we wanted to visit a few schools where there were really interesting things happening. And so Martina, the coordinator at QUEST, and myself, we set out to travel to Tallinn, to Estonia, because we had heard about the Suvemäe school within a school, and we just had to go see how it was happening, how they were managing, how within a public school, how were they managing to have a kind of a school within a school that was functioning fully democratically. And so we just went there to do a few interviews. And when we sat down, Charlie said, okay, look, you can have a room, and anybody that wants to come and speak to you, any of the students can just come and spend some time with you. And as soon as the first student came in, we understood we had to film. So we weren't prepared at all. And so we just pulled out our handphones and we started recording. And then for 2 days, there was we basically held all these different interviews and we recorded, and one thing led to the other, and we turned it into a little movie that we screened at the Learning Planet last year. So we didn't we decided not to screen it again this year, but we're going to put the link in the chat. So for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, it's a great video to watch. Yep, and perfect. So the link now should be in the chat. I really encourage you. There's Derry is interviewed in this movie, so you will see a lot of him in there, a lot of Charlie also, and especially a lot of the students talking and covering a wide range of questions that you might have. And also, interestingly, in the movie, we got a chance to interview the headmaster of the school. And so it's very interesting to get a little bit of both sides of how they were trying to balance things in order to make this work, and also to fulfill state requirements within Estonia. And Derry and Charlie can say a little bit more right after. But just before I pass the floor, I just want to mention also just 1 or 2 extra things. Within the DESK project, and it's not part of the DESK project, but this is something we did additionally, we got together 50 practical tools that teachers can implement in their classrooms in order to add to their toolkit of democratic practices. And so this also, we're going to put a link in the chat because it can be a really cool, practical, good practices collection. So this will also be in the chat, and maybe also at the end of the session, maybe some participants here can also share about certain difficulties or tips that they might be thinking of. This was an idea that we had for this session while we were preparing for it. And now I'm going to pass the floor. We have Derry Hannam, renowned for championing the concept of the 20% time initiative. This approach allocates 20% of students' school time to pursue self-directed projects rooted in their passions and interests. By fostering creativity, autonomy, and real-world problem solving, this method has demonstrated how student agency can transform educational outcomes. Dr. Hannam will share the principles behind this initiative and its impact. And following Dr. Hannam, we will also hear from Charlie Moreno, the visionary behind the school within a school model implemented at the Suvemäe school in Tallinn, Estonia, featured also in the movie. So This innovative framework creates smaller, personalized learning communities within a larger school where democratic education is implemented 100% of the time, and within the state requirements in place in the country. So that's also like the challenge that Charlie can also talk to us about in order to balance freedom and responsibility. So I will pass the floor to Derry.
Okay, excuse me. I've got a bad throat, and if you're lucky, I'll run out of steam quite quickly, and you can go and have lunch. Thanks for that, Mia. Okay, so I'm Derry Hannam. I spent 20 years in 3 state secondary schools in England, creating what I could call Summerhill-inspired, self-directed learning spaces in democratic and rights-respecting contexts. My book tells the story of the first of these. Whoops. 2 years in a Buckinghamshire secondary modern school where kids were labelled as failures at the age of 11. I've put my email in the chat, and if anyone would like a PDF of the book, just email me and I'll send it to you. I thought I'd be fired as I binned most of the prescribed subject curriculum and let the kids choose what they wanted to learn about in the 40% of curriculum time that I was responsible for. I wasn't fired. I was promoted and put in charge of a team of 7 teachers and all the 7 classes of the age group as they moved up a grade. I'm still in touch with quite a few of those students as they come up to retirement age. They all remember those 2 years. 2 have written a chapter in the book. And as I say, I put my email in the chat. Would love to hear from you. The crucial commodity that young people need in order to find and deepen their interests and identity and to learn how to live with others is time. Time to think, to wonder, to question, to create, to make and learn friends, to find out who they are, and a space to do it in. Yet this is the one thing that prior to COVID, most state secondary and increasingly primary schools deprived them of. Lunch hours and recess playtimes were shortened or cut. The encroachment into their free time was not just during the school day, but also at home, in the evenings and at weekends, with relentless homework and test examination revision. Even during COVID and during school lockdowns, many schools aimed to teach online on a full school day basis. The tasks set were often conventional schoolwork and teacher talk from the screen instead of from the whiteboard, followed by a conventional test. Some parents were expecting and requiring this, but a growing number were not. Young people missed their friends during the pandemic lockdown, but many did not miss lessons where they had no choice, no control or agency, and no consent in their learning. Many parents struggled to present this curriculum to their children at home. Research into Canadian parents' attitudes to school curriculum since COVID showed that 73% thought that much more attention should be given to the interests of the students when the schools reopened. Danish parents found that since the exams and mandatory learning goals are abandoned for now, teachers report feeling more playful with students. They're working with co-creation and involving students in making decisions more than before. There's more quality time spent between teachers and students, resulting in better relationships and increased student well-being. So the emphasis switched from teaching to learning, from prescribed content to inquiry, and freed from the pressure of examination preparation, a change in the quality of student-teacher relations to include more student participation and creativity. What an opportunity this provided to do things differently when the schools reopened for all students. But it hasn't happened in my country. We're too busy catching up with lost, largely boring and meaningless curriculum. Self-determination theory demonstrates an association between mental health and well-being and the student agency and autonomy provided by participation in decisions about their own learning and in belonging to a community of learners as their competencies develop. Time and space for self-directed and self-exploring learning around the interests, concerns, questions, enthusiasms, passions, talents, and purposes of the young people themselves. Jerome Bruner spoke of the 3 C's of childhood, that children are naturally curious, collaborative, and need to feel competent, adding with the late Ken Robinson that they're naturally creative. It's perfectly possible to have a school system where vision and implementation are aligned, where academic attainment does not create the pressure, anxiety, loss of well-being, and threat to mental health that we're witnessing in England, with our national tragedy of the planned failure of a third of our young people in our high stakes GCSE examination after 11 years of compulsory schooling and being told that the purpose of life is high grades. We've designed the thing to fail a third of the kids. It is, as I say, a national tragedy and has an awful effect on the self-confidence of young people. Finland, for example, under the banner of less is more, has a shorter school day than most, with minimal homework, a legal maximum of 30 minutes per night in total, and none allowed at weekends, which are held to belong to the students. No high-stakes national tests until the final year of high school. And despite this apparently more relaxed approach to schooling, academic performance is higher on average in Finland than in most European and North American school systems. Some English secondary schools have what are called activities weeks at the end of summer term when examinations are finished and the serious stuff is out of the way. A wide variety of off-curriculum activities occur, including students, parents, and community groups, often offered to mixed age groups. The variety and enthusiasm generated can be impressive. School and community turn on to each other. Relationships can be transformed by this exercise in democratic citizenship. Students previously disengaged from school can change their attitudes both to school and to themselves as learners, as entirely new opportunities for choice and engagement emerge. In the rural Derbyshire school where I was community vice principal, a community newspaper co-edited by adults and students emerged, which 30 years later has just published its 200th edition. A community orchestra began with 80 players aged 8 to 80 that's still performing. There are rural schools where many students cannot take part in extracurricular activities because of long bus journeys home, where programs of electives move extracurricular into the regular school timetable for one afternoon per week. These are negotiated between students and all adult staff around the interests, questions, concerns, purposes, passions, and enthusiasms of both. In one school where I was an inspector, close to a famous motor racing circuit, and with the assistance of some parents, a mixed age and mixed gender group actually built a working racing car, which they terrified local people by driving round the school field, as this was an elective project. Because conventional teaching time was reduced, it was possible for the electives programme to have a budget, and if no staff member could be found, an expert could be hired. One parent told me that their children would get off their deathbeds to get to school on electives day. Interestingly, this school had very few exclusions for bad behaviour, high levels of attendance, especially on electives afternoon on Wednesdays, and better than expected examination results with schools compared to schools in similar socioeconomic circumstances. The International Baccalaureate Middle Years 11 to 16 programme personal project, the extended project qualification EPQ in our A-levels, the personal project 20% component of Rosina Dorelli's biophilic curriculum, the EdXL project qualifications. These in England all offer self-directed opportunities for those students who are fortunate enough to attend the few schools where they're available. No one questions their power of engagement or that the time allocated to them undermines standards in the rest of the curriculum. As Kate Longworth of Gaia Learning, which celebrates personalised curriculum, creates personalised curriculum for neurodiverse learners, she says, the simple idea is that when learners engage with what they're passionate about, motivation and focus increase. And when that happens, there's more success and, of course, enhanced well-being. In Germany now, there are more than 300 state secondary schools in the Schule im Aufbruch program, led by Berlin head teacher Margret Rasfeld, where Fridays are indeed Freitags, giving students the opportunity to have a free day to devise studies of their own choice around the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, 1 day a week, 20% of curriculum time. So I'm getting to the point. Thank God for that, I hear you say. Okay, the 20% no-brainer proposal. Here it comes. I call it a no-brainer proposal because when I suggest it to groups of people, they say that's a no-brainer. So I say, well, why the hell doesn't it happen if it's such a no-brainer? Anyway, here it comes. My modest no-brainer proposal is that all schools, primary and secondary, should allocate 20% of curriculum time for negotiation around the questions, concerns, enthusiasms, purposes, passions, talents, and interests of the students. Time for individual or collaborative self-directed learning. In schools where the learning has been very largely adult-directed, self-directed 20% time would need to be introduced with careful preparation to ensure that vision and implementation were aligned. Students could be organised into small tutorial groups for support and monitoring, as practiced at the Self-Managed Learning College in Brighton, or the idea of crew, as practiced at the XP State Schools in Doncaster. Teachers with research experience could be joined by academics from local universities to provide support, especially in the case of floundering paralysis or panic in those possibly neurodiverse students who might suffer anxiety and uncertainty at the new responsibility and opportunity offered to them. This support, of course, should not threaten student ownership of their projects. Flourishing, thriving, and agency, not coercion, would be the key drivers. The introduction of 20% time would fit nicely into schools that are developing digital learner profiles, along with some cross-curricular teacher-led project-based learning, perhaps using the universal framework of essential skills that's being developed. Of course, some students might choose to use their 20% time to extend and deepen their learning in a mainstream subject, though any sign of parental competitive pressure would need to be carefully monitored and resisted, as they found at the Sudbury Valley School when they offered a curriculum. Some parents insisted that their kids chose the math option, for example. So at Sudbury Valley, they've abolished curriculum altogether unless it's something requested by the kids. It's very interesting, and I've spent a fortnight at Sudbury Valley School, though I would hesitate to suggest that. My 20% proposal sounds much more reasonable to me. And as I say, I'm continually told that it's a no-brainer. The staff could also use this time to pursue their own research questions and interests, thus becoming model exemplars of lifelong learning for the students. Sometimes the students themselves can be facilitators for other students. A teacher recently wrote in my Union magazine about how much more her students knew about climate change than she did, and she was a science teacher. Her kids have so much to learn from each other. When I introduced my self-directed education and self-directed opportunities into my first school that I wrote the book about, the one pressure that I applied to the kids was, look, if you found this incredibly interesting, the history of wedding dresses, for example, if you found it absolutely fascinating, please be prepared to tell the rest of us about it, because we may not have heard of it or thought about it, and we might find it absolutely fascinating too. I remember one kid who rang bells in his church, you know, pulling on the ropes, making the bells ring. He thought nobody else would be interested. In fact, the whole class was incredibly interested, and we took a busload of kids one Sunday morning to hear him and his colleagues actually ringing the bells in the local church. You never know what kids are going to find interesting. And if other kids have found it interesting, you're off to a good start. Anyway, the negotiation process itself would be very educational. The motivation and morale of adults and students will rise. The morale of students in England is a terrible state at present. We've got 170,000 students to subscribe to a Facebook. How the hell do I get out of teaching and get my life going again? 170,000. We've only got 250,000 teachers in the whole country. The low morale is awful. And I'm sure this 20% idea, well, these are the people who say to me, it's a no-brainer. This is what I came into teaching to do, and I'm not allowed to do. Anyway, I'm arguing that attendance and results will improve, exclusions will decline because there's less antisocial behaviour, none at all in some of the schools I visited. Students will learn how to take responsibility for at least part of their own learning and learn how to manage at least part of their own time. Most crucial, if they're to deal with the changes, opportunities and uncertainties that the fourth industrial revolution and AI and climate change are already presenting us with. Students will learn to discover their own genius and create their own identities, rather than just being defined by test scores. If paid employment declines in the future with AI and the fourth industrial revolution, and universal basic income becomes the norm, young people will learn how to be unique, creative, socially responsible citizens who do not rely on full-time paid work for their identity. They'll have learned the entrepreneurial skills necessary to launch their own economic and social enterprises. 20% time could be an incubator for student-initiated small businesses supported by mentors from the local community. This would provide the extra staff to make the facilitation possible. Schools could create a 20% committee of staff and students to plan how the programme would be organised. This would require students to participate in serious school decision making, avoiding the tokenism of too many student councils. A 20% or passion department could be created, led by a teacher of vice principal status and staffed by teachers from all subjects who chose to work in this way. It would create a team of experienced self-directed learning facilitators. It should have its own part of the school buildings, the 20% wing or school within a school that Charlie is going to talk about, where presentations of student projects and initiatives could be held. An entirely new approach to assessment would be required on process as much as finished project. Failure would be something to be learned from and not to be feared. We have two organisations, the Edge Foundation and Rethinking Assessment, with my friend James Mannion. They have much to offer here. There's a lot of work on alternatives to assessment going on around the world. The 20% department could develop digital pupil profiling, which would gradually be adopted across the whole school. 20% of students of possibly mixed ages would be in the 20% wing at any one time. Already in my country, there are teachers quietly introducing 20% time just into their own classes, sometimes under another name, such as pondering time. In the Hampshire Religious Education Agreed Syllabus, pioneered by the RE department of a large Isle of Wight school, pondering time is beginning to catch on. I think that's a lovely idea. Universities could develop 20% laboratory schools in programs such as the EU Erasmus Plus funded Lab Schools Europe program, or the Needs Network. It's lovely to have Eva here from Limerick in Ireland, where maybe she could tell us a bit about the Needs program in the Q&A. Every school should be all free to organise the use of this 20% time in its own way. It could be half a day a week plus 20% of some lessons, or 2 half days, or 1 day a week, or 20% of all lessons. And of course, it was found that if it was found that as students become more motivated, the compulsory directed curriculum could be managed in a reducing amount of time, so that perhaps the 20/80 could shift towards being 80/20. The 20% proposal is already happening in the US in the 20 time movement, described in detail by Kevin Brookhauser in this book, How Educators Can Launch Google's Formula for Future-Ready Innovation. Recently, the Economist Intelligence Unit, an offshoot of the Economist newspaper, produced a report called Staff 2030, The Future of Teacher Training. It recommends 20% of curriculum time for student-directed learning. It judged that the competencies developed are precisely those needed for the future workplace of the fourth industrial revolution, and that our current school systems are completely failing to produce. Namely, self-directed autonomous learners, self-starters and creators. The 20% idea has even surfaced in the newsletter of our UK Local Government Association magazine. Can you imagine a more boring magazine? But there it is, arguing for 20%, so I'm not finding it boring at all. I think it's great. It's ironic that the evolved nature of human childhood, as described by Bruner or Peter Gray, of playful, creative, autonomous, yet collaborative young people, that this is now aligning with the needs of enlightened employers. Yet few schools or school systems seem to be making the connection. We need innovation or moonshot time, where students are free to come up with their own ideas of what they want to do and study and how they want to do it. Your students will be future ready if you give them the time, says Esther Bajitsky of Palo Alto High School in Silicon Valley. She was a member of the Economist Intelligence Unit report team. I was so pleased to see her there. Time, she says, is perhaps the greatest gift we can give to young people. Bajitsky's students use 20% of their class time for totally self-directed projects, where their natural learning instinct takes flight, either individually or more usually in collaboration with others. As in Finland, we must stop filling every moment at school and at home with prescribed curriculum. Companies such as the conglomerate Semco in Brazil and sponsor of the Lumiere schools, or the Scott Bader Commonwealth Paint Company in the UK, or 3M or Target in the US, all these corporations use company training programs to encourage employees to widen and deepen their learning by following their own personal passions and interest in a percentage of paid work time. Google has introduced a 20% project where employees can follow their own ideas beyond their actual job descriptions for 20% of their work time, leading to some of the most profitable innovations for the company, such as Gmail and AdSense. Both were developed in her 20th century time by one of Esther Vajitsky's daughters, Susan, sadly just died. She was CEO of YouTube for a while. All over the world, we're seeing campaigns for change coming from young people themselves. In the UK, Teach the Future argues for a more relevant climate change curriculum. At last, it's being listened to by policymakers. there would be students in many schools who would almost certainly use their 20% for this purpose. Young people are natural learners. We need to release their creativity in time to save the planet, as so many young people have been arguing at this festival. I've nearly finished, folks, 3 cheers, but could it be that at last the natural learning potential of young people will align with the emerging social and economic needs for collaborative and creative innovators? Could schools actually become places that nurture the social and economic entrepreneurs that our future needs? People who are capable of facing up to the challenges confronting us, not least the implications of climate change. I'm very encouraged that several organisations, such as Human Scale Education, and Rosalind is here, I'm so pleased to see you, Rosalind, hi, from Human Scale Education in England. Human Scale Education is backing the 20% ideas in their submissions to the current English governmental curriculum and assessment review. One final word of encouragement. These ideas are beginning to appear in the mainstream media in several countries. I was very excited, not by Trump's election, but by something else that appeared in the New York Times a fortnight ago. In a guest essay in the NYT on the 2nd of January, it was entitled, "Giving Kids Some Autonomy Has Surprising Results" by Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop, who've just written a book called The Disengaged Team. And they quote 35 studies from 18 countries, and this is how they describe them. When students have autonomy and agency and control, they become more engaged, better able to master new schools, gain higher grades in the rest of the curriculum, and have fewer problems with their peers. And, wow, they are happier too. Well, these findings were totally replicated in my own research for the English Education Minister. So, folks, I'm there. Vote 20%. You know it makes sense. And if anyone would like I can't believe that you would, but if anyone would like a copy of that talk, I'll send a PDF to anyone who wants it. My email address is in the chat. Thanks, Mia. I've left 5 minutes for Charlie.
Thank you so much, Derry, and I'm so happy that your voice held out all the way till the end of this fascinating. It's just always wonderful to hear all of this. So thanks so much, and yes, Charlie, you still have some time, so maybe you can.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, yeah.
I think that we will go until at least 40 minutes, right? We still have 40 minutes. So the goal is also to have some, thank you, Derry, to have some conversation here. And yeah, it's always inspiring to listen to Derry and you know, the reflections that are so articulate and so much needed. I'm going to share a very brief presentation that speaks a little bit about Suvemäe, this pilot school in Estonia in Northern Europe. But I would like it to be a bit more general in terms of what could be a school within a school. When I first met Derry, I think it was 2016 in Israel, he talked to me about, I think it was right after Strasbourg, this conference on education and democracy. And he told me about, yeah, you know, democratic education, it's very powerful, it's very interesting. You can see it was in Hadera in Israel. But the challenge continues being there, right? That most of the kids are in public and conventional schools. And as he often says, speaking of democracy in a conventional school is more or less like checking a travel brochure when you are in jail. And this continues being the challenge, right? We continue preaching about democracy and the greatness of democracy, but the actual practice is very limited. So he talked to me, I remember talking to him, talking to Mike Weidman, talking to Andreas Hinz, And he told me about the 20% approach, and that sounded very interesting. I started researching about it, and he also mentioned the case of the school within the school at the Colberian approach in Boston or in Chicago, in Boston, I think. And that really, really inspired me. At that moment, I was in the middle of my PhD research. I was researching a democratic school in Spain and connecting the practices of democratic education with the theoretical framework built towards an education for social justice and inclusion. When I finished these studies, I went back to Estonia, where I had lived already for almost 10 years at that time, 2000, and no, even longer, 12 years, 2018. I started working in it's an NGO that started in the US called Teach for America. And it spread all around the world. In Estonia, it's called Young People to the School. And basically, I was working there. I worked there for 3 months, I have to accept, and there were philosophical, pedagogical discrepancies in between us with the people who were managing this project. Basically, they were recruiting young professionals who had never been teachers, and for a period of 2 years, they were training them to become school teachers and to fill the gaps, the shortage of teachers in Estonia particularly. So I got to this organization as a training manager. And immediately I started seeing, the difficulties. I was speaking with graduates of this program, of people who had been there at least for 2 years, and they were sharing the frustration because they were talking about democracy, they were talking about inclusion in the universities, but they were getting into the schools, into very structured, very rigid structures, and they couldn't find actually room to implement more democratic, innovative approaches to education. And this inspired me to bet on the second option that Derry shared with me, the school within a school. So I started gathering, just organizing tea-taking meetings in different places, and I met 2 families. Both of the kids had been diagnosed with ADHD, and they were at brink of being medicated, and they didn't want that for the kids. So they were looking for something that was different, and they wanted to support this kind of alternative. So with them, we met a couple of school leaders, and finally we managed to design a plan to open a democratic education branch within a public school, where Mia and Martina visited us. I think it was in 2023. And I have to say, well, if you haven't watched this video, I very much invite you, because for us, it was also the opportunity to reflect about our work from a different perspective. We were immersed in the day-to-day challenges. And then when we started recognizing the narratives of the kids, what they were telling us about this space, how they were feeling, how they were building the self-esteem again, this value, this worth to their lives, that was truly inspiring, and for us was very much needed. So this is a bit the story of Suvemäe, and how not the particularities, but how it managed to create a space in which young people could explore also their interests within the public state schooling. And I would like to, first of all, share with you these reflections. Let's say that we are jumping to the conclusions. But I would like to keep this in mind. Throughout my research, I came in contact with different approaches. From the Israeli democratic schools to Summerhill to Sudbury Valley School. And I realized that democratic education as an umbrella concept needs to accommodate also to the local conditions. It is the local community, the one that is shaping these kind of processes. Within the context of a post-Soviet country in Northern Europe, with a very conservative tradition of schooling, we started building on that and started gaining terrain little by little on how we could do things. The requirements to start this kind of approach for us was autonomy. That's super important, to be able to make decisions, to rearrange spaces, to also consider with young people how different kinds of learnings could happen. But super important, actually the order might be the other way around. First of all, I would mention slow time. And this is something that we don't have in our conventional schools. I don't call them normal schools because, in my opinion, there is nothing normal about separating kids by age, organizing their days, the authority of an adult all the time. I feel they are based on conventions. That's why I call it conventional. We have very little time. It's all the time like a rush. And when we want to build these approaches that privilege, facilitate youth participation through school meetings, for instance, we need slow time. So this was a requirement that we were going to allocate, to organize a timetable with young people in a way that we could have enough time to discuss what was happening in the school, or how we wanted to solve conflicts, or how we wanted to reorganize the spaces, or what kind of learning experiences we wanted to have. At the same time, having this autonomy didn't mean that it's ridiculous, and I would say even ironic, that whenever we speak about democracy and we put together these two words, democratic school, democratic education, people are thinking most of the times of anarchy, of let the kids do whatever they want to do. Whereas in reality, a democracy involves responsibilities and freedoms, right? And then needs to be a balance. So some of those responsibilities we just couldn't hide from, and this had to do specifically with academic requirements. Both the school leaders, the main school leader, the main house leaders, but also parents were concerned. They wanted to understand, okay, I support democracy, but fear is always behind. Well, it's a motivator in our lives in a way. Influences our decisions radically. And they wanted to understand whether the kids would have at least this minimum that was required for the state exam. So we needed to come to a certain degree of flexibility to find different kind of possibilities of solutions, but also compromises. And the moment when this started to work was the moment when we adults stopped taking responsibility for the academic requirements and share with young people, this exists with our students. This exists, but it exists because there is a big amount of trust, and there are these requirements that we need to address. If we don't deal with those requirements, this space wouldn't exist. So, very openly we ask the kids in the very first meetings, we need your help. Without you, this cannot exist. So that shifted a bit, not a bit, I would say that a lot. The attitude, the whole commitment that kids were displaying, were building towards this learning environment that was so different. So when we started doing this, we started envisioning different possibilities. And the possibilities for youth participation. We also were following Landis student voice model, in which there is a space, there is a voice, there is the audience, and there is an influence. So it's not cosmetical, but actually it intends to bring the ideas, concerns, interests of young people to action. And we started doing this through the school meetings. Later on, speaking with John O'Reilly, who's here. Thank you, John. We realized that we needed to get more into the basis of negotiated curriculum. What does that mean? What are the possibilities? And then there was a lot of work on trying to get this message across beyond the school and across society, across different sectors in society. Perhaps we could have done more on that field, but the pilot school still exists. I'm not anymore working with the school. Last summer, I decided to take a sabbatical, so I stepped down as head of studies, and then I am in different projects, but following the school. My child, she's 14, she is in the school, and I'm very glad that the school continues, and it's an example of possibilities within the state system. So if you haven't watched the video, please, I invite you to watch it whenever you have the chance. Now, some of the characteristics of Suvemäe, of this particular case of democratic education within public schooling. On the one hand, the idea, the perspective of democratizing decision-making mechanisms was very strong. We kept it. Nowadays, twice a week, young people and adults get together to talk about, decide on topics that are important to them and important to the school, for the school in order to survive and to continue to become stronger. Students were involved in different levels. One of those, for instance, was creating the timetable, also analyzing the curriculum, and I will speak about this briefly, and also what kind of assessment we wanted to implement, how we decided that if there were let's say official requirements, in what way we wanted to demonstrate that those requirements have been met, if this was more of an interest-based activity, in what way we wanted to build on that kind of scheme of where do I want to reach, what do I want to learn, how do I want to learn it, how I'm going to share it with the community. And this was a collaborative process. The second thing had to do with self-directed learning, but again, this is a space that had to get into compromises. Being part of the state schooling system, there were lots of pressure in regards to academic achievement. There were open questions, as even from colleagues in the main house. So your children don't do anything, are they remaining stupid? So this adult-centric perspective of childhood as a savage and as imperfect. So we had to deal with those requirements. Our kids in Estonia, they are assessed in mathematics, Estonian, and sciences in the 6th and 9th class, in the 3rd class as well, but 6th, 9th class. So we devised an approach in which the timetable could be organized in different ways to deal with formal learning of certain subjects. Obviously, abandoning coercion, abandoning the pressure of exams or excessive homework. Most of the homework is done in the school with the kids together, different age groups, they get together and they help each other. So there were formal learning arrangements for mathematics, Estonian language, and the sciences. But even within those formal learning arrangements, meaning that in some cases there are lectures, it's the teacher teaching the lesson. There is a lot of room for young people to also propose to build together the assessment criteria, choose different kinds of topics and how to address those through experimentation, through visit to different kind of institutions, museums, inviting guests, and so on. The second possibility had to do with non-formal learning. And this dealt with other subjects which are in the state curriculum, the official curriculum of the Republic of Estonia, for instance, with languages or with social sciences. So we were focusing in languages, for instance. We were not grouping kids according to their age, but rather we had with the kids different kind of activities in order to grasp the actual level of language. And with them, then we started building different groups according to the skill and building the activities that were going to happen there. So this was co-created In some cases, kids would choose a language that we were not able to teach, like Korean, so they organized their own clubs, and we found people to visit them and to help them learn these languages. In some other cases, they were much more autonomous, using some sort of archaic at the moment AI. And in some cases, they were just, for instance, the kids with higher level of English, they were helping the kids with lower level of English. So you could see this age mix environment in which the support went beyond my circle of friends and started to build a real learning community. And then we had also informal learning arrangements in which the kids could build clubs of different sorts. The one that I told you about, Korean language and culture, existed for a long time. There were carpentry clubs, there were chess clubs, mental health club, in which the kids were, with the support of a social pedagogue, providing each other with support in moments of crisis, in moments of difficult mental state. So we had to get to compromises and to start devising the curriculum as some subjects that had to be covered in a more formal way in order to gain more space for ideas, possibilities that came from the kids themselves. So even history, for instance, it was interest-based. We had a major topic, they were focusing on different aspects of that topic. They were building together different narratives, in some cases enacting, in some cases creating rap songs about the death of an American president or this kind of stuff, but it came from them, from their own interests. As I mentioned, especially in the second and third learning arrangements, non-formal and informal, there was a lot of group mixing. There is a lot of communication. I feel that this is one of the biggest challenges that we are having when we address conventional schools and we want to influence the practice, is that nowadays, well, already for a long run, most of the cases, the people who are making educational laws are not psychologists, they are not pedagogues, they are not social pedagogues. Most of the cases, they are lawyers, engineers, business people. And they are thinking in terms of the economy, how to maximize resources. So the reason for these huge, massive schools with 1,000 students is not because they learn better, it's only an economic projection. For these kind of spaces, if we really want people to start living a democracy, we need spaces in which people stop being anonymous and they have a name, they have likes, they have dislikes, they have situations. And this is something that happily has happened in Suvemäe. Of course, it's a small space, it has 80 students. The projections, the calculations is that these kind of places could work well with 200 students, but definitely it's Hadera in Israel has 600 students, so it's very interesting to see how they have built on these dynamics, but it's very hard to start changing the school culture towards a more democratic solutions if we have this anonymity in the air. So age mixed groups, they're very interesting for the kids learning from each other, also developing caring attitudes, exploring different sorts of interests. So this is one of the characteristics. And also there is enough unplanned time, which is translated into free time and free play. The youngest kids that come to Suvemäe age, and there is also risk play, as you can see up there. The youngest kids that come to Suvemäe are 7-year-olds. They come to the first class, and they have around 65–70% of the time in the school is free non-directed play. And this is great because then they start exploring their own interests, they start trying different things, but also they get into conflicts. And when they get into conflicts, we have the opportunity to help them learn how to express themselves, how to understand the other perspective, develop empathy, how to also deal with the challenges that they are feeling. So the older the kids get, the more academic requirements they have, but at least 8th, 9th graders have around 20% of the time in the school as their own. Following a bit, there is a proposal of 20% for their own interests. So during that time, they come up with interesting, different, innovative solutions. Of course, another challenge that we have is finances. So you will see in the movie that documentary made by Quest that there are resources, but several things are lacking, right? And this is a concern. It's been always under funded public school. But we have these possibilities whenever the weather is good in Estonia, which is like 2 months a year. Then kids are playing outside, having fun, enjoying, but also exploring different sorts of things. In the back, after this picture was taken, there was around here. There is now a greenhouse. There is a compost. The kids are participating in all this. They are building stuff in the back of the house. They build a Zen garden. So the school is moving, and I feel that this is one of the most important things within these kind of approaches, is that there is enough flexibility to implement different sorts of solutions. This is just a sample of the timetable. They have different kinds of groups. This was 2 years ago, but different kinds of groups, different kinds of activities. They can also choose at some points what they're doing, how they are doing, with whom. Some kids are going, they are done with the 3rd class mathematics, so they join different groups in order to, get different kind of challenges. And this is just a very short video of showing some creativity and how comfortable the kids are feeling in the school when we are listening to them, when we're involving them in decision making. They fixed this trumpet. It was broken, so they were making music around the school, and that was funny to some and very annoying to others. Okay, we already saw that. And that would be it from my side. I would like to invite you all to watch the video, and also to the Democratic Education Conference. European and international meeting will happen in August in Belgium. If you are not yet, please join EUDEC, the European Democratic Education Community, and also the Rights-Centric Education Network. We are gathering forces. We are trying to get together, and it would be great if you could join us. So let's now open the floor. Maybe there are questions, or you would like to show the video. We can share it also with on the chat, and so we can have more time to conversate and exchange ideas. Thank you.
Did anybody mention that Suvemäe translates to Summerhill in English?
Yes, that's a good point. It was a choice by the students. There were several possibilities, and they all chose it. Some of them have actually been to Summerhill, and they were enchanted by this possibility. Yes. We would like to listen to you, so please, the floor is open. Kenny.
Yes. Hey, first of all, it's amazing to connect with you again. With some of you, I don't know everybody yet. But I had a question for Derry regarding a sentence that you said in the Suvemäe documentary, and that's the one about Andreas Schleicher, where you say that even Andreas Schleicher is expressing that we have to stop what we're doing because we're creating robots. And my question is, like, when did he express this? Is it written down anywhere? Because lots of people knows Andreas Schleicher as one of those people you have to listen to. So I'm just wondering if there's a valid resource of this. First of all, you're a great resource, Derry. You've already said it. If there's more it would be amazing to receive this.
I didn't hear the last bit, Kenny. Was it something very rude about me? Schleicher, yeah, Schleicher's now famous for this. I think Schleicher got fed up with going to places where Pasi Sahlberg was there and Hattie from Australia. He got fed up with being accused of corrupting the whole world's education system with his damn PISA league tables, just looking at mother tongue mathematics and science results. And I think he had a genuine road to Damascus experience where he realized that in narrowing, this had had a narrowing effect on curriculum around the whole world, and that was destructive of children and also destructive of the talents of children that the world needed, the creativity and the curiosity. I think it was a genuine conversion. He doesn't actually overtly criticize the league table approach of PISA, but he's certainly talking about a much wider range of qualities, skills and assessments. And there's no doubt OECD is doing some interesting work on the kind of things that we would value, the soft skills, recognizing how important they are and how they can be assessed. I think it's difficult, this question of assessment. I don't think we can totally get away from it because it's closely associated in public school systems with accountability and money. And I think it's reasonable for people to feel if they're going to pay taxes for a state school system, there ought to be some way of knowing what it's doing. And of course, an awful lot of what it's doing at present is harmful. And we have to get that across. But I think it's also important to get across the good bits, if you can find any, which is why I was encouraged by the New York Times article. There is good work going on all around the world. And Charlie's example is part of it.
Thanks, Derry.
Thank you. There was thank you for the comments and the messages. There was a question by Chris. What is the interaction between Suvemäe and the state, either local and national? Yes, the kids in Suvemäe, they take the same state exams as the rest of the kids in the country. It's interesting to see that the results, even though they don't get as many hours, for instance, on mathematics, 4 hours a week, they get rather 3 or 2. The results are very similar. But what is different is the emotional shape, balance that the kids find it. There is one of the reasons why I left was because I felt that my presence in the school was also affecting the way how Suvemäe was being accepted, or at least being taken into account. Me, as a foreigner in Estonia, was sometimes perceived as somebody who was criticizing the best education according to PISA, the best education in the world according to PISA, whereas I was trying to build an alternative. So there has been a little bit of skepticism, not a little bit, a lot of skepticism, and a bit of indifference from universities. There are privately, some university professors are very supportive. They like what they hear. They go and see, and they are surprised, and they are curious. But openly, they are not betting on it. So it's a bit mixed feeling. The response by the society, it's very positive. Families want to know more about it. The media has come to visit. There are some articles and some reports on the school. But still, I feel that in the case of Estonia, one of the worst things that could happen to educational change is the fact that they are getting the best results in PISA, which is also closely related to the decline in mental health in young people. Right? Estonia is also one of the countries that has the highest percentages of child and teenage self-harm and suicide. But of course, if we are going to speak about PISA, then the focus is only on PISA. Yes, Derry.
I was at a conference in Washington of citizenship educators a year or two ago, and a friend of mine, Michael Arlo from Northern Ireland, got involved in a discussion about which country in the world has the biggest conflict. He claimed to be one of the leaders, and I think the same is going on with well-being now. When you said Estonia has one of the highest levels of young people suicide, I was about to chip in, but England has the highest level of unhappiness in its young people. The situation is awful. And I think Schleicher realizes that in part he's been responsible for this, only in part, of course, that PISA has been harmful. Right now, English education ministers are trying to shut down home education and alternative provisions just at a time when we need them, because it's worried that lots of kids are just refusing to go to school. And they're claiming that England has one of the best education systems in the world because it scored highly in science and math in PISA. There's things it didn't say, like some of the lowest achieving schools didn't enter their figures into the results, so the data is corrupt. But the PISA scores are still being widely claimed as a justification for an awful lot of educational practices that we would think are just terrible and are actually responsible for the loss of well-being of young people. So I don't want to be facetious. I recognise the problems you've got in Estonia, but by God, we've got problems in England as well. I wonder if, while she's still here, Eva from Limerick would tell us a bit about the Needs project in Ireland, which is also attempting to introduce young people into the curriculum decision-making processes. It's very interesting. And something I've learned from their project is that concerns, the word concerns is really important. Trying to unearth what the concerns of young people are and address those. But I think she might be in a meeting where she can't speak. Are you still here, Eva? She's still got a... She's not answering, so I guess she can't.
She was in a co-working space.
I can chip in there, Jerry. It's John O'Reilly. I'm supervising Eva's PhD. So,
oh, haha!
Yeah, you didn't pick up on my little dig at you earlier on. But anyway,
Jono, I don't think of you as Jono. I've got a grandson who's a Jono.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
I don't know if anyone would refer to me as such, but it's thanks for today, by the way, everyone. Yeah, well, with Needs briefly, we're focused on. I think it's a very interesting thing. Both yourself and Charlie mentioned time, and I think time is the crucial thing. If anything is to be taken seriously, if we are sincere about it, it must be given time. So what we're doing with Needs, which stands for Negotiating the Essentials for Education in Democratic Societies, is we have worked with government and policymakers to use a space in our lower secondary school curriculum, which is 100 contact hours over 3 years, where students use curriculum negotiation to develop learning with their teachers in a form of co-inquiry that starts with the questions: what are you concerned about yourself, and then about the world around you that you'd like to learn more about. And the reason we focus on concerns is based on the idea that if I'm interested in something in the modern age with sufficient technology and motivation, I can go off and pursue it myself. But the concerns that we face into, and a lot of them were mentioned by yourself, Derry, whether it's climate change or cost of living crisis and so forth, these are things we can only begin to understand, never mind solve, through collective endeavor and collective intelligence. So it's based on that. And at the moment, we're working with 4 schools. We have our curriculum agency and our various support agencies working with us. And so what we hope to do is demonstrate what is possible when you use this space within the curriculum, the formal curriculum that can be done by any school anywhere in the country, to illustrate what is possible. And it's based on other work, previous work I've done in Limerick with pre-primary, upper primary, and 4 secondary schools, lower secondary, where we found extraordinary things when you opened up that space for students to properly kind of demonstrate what they're capable of. And it's got all kinds of other connections with children's rights and assumptions about childhood, etc. So we're hopeful that we will bring this to Europe. In fact, Charlie had been part of a consortium I put together to apply for Horizon funding. And at the moment, I'm working with Mia. Sarah, I haven't met you yet, but with QUEST, where we will hopefully get work going on that. And the ambition is that we bring this kind of, because it's an interesting question. Charlie, you mentioned structure a lot, and that structure can stultify, and I think you're right. But equally, I think especially where schools come to this from nothing maybe, and come from the traditional system where everything is structured to death, a certain structure is necessary at the very least to initiate the process. So we have this 10-step process to begin the negotiation. I won't say more than that, but watch this space. We'll have more coming out of it.
Great points, John. Thank you. Derry, you wanted to add?
I just wanted to apologize to John. I didn't realize who he was. Why are you hiding your face, John?
Well, okay, it's very simple, Derry. We had this big storm and power cuts, right? Which we've only just had resumed. And I'm sitting here in a robe to keep myself warm. So I didn't think in such august company that it was appropriate to appear so disheveled and, you know, unkempt.
Oh, show their camera, show their camera. Derry, you wanted to add something?
No, that was it, really. I hope he's still speaking to me, because I think the Needs project is fantastic.
I agree. I wanted to address one comment by Sari, and John mentioned it. When I put up the autonomy, I was referring to the project itself, right? To the need for this small community, or semi-small, to be able to make decisions, make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, change things. So there is a high degree of autonomy and flexibility that is required. But definitely, yes, we are keeping an eye on how the kids' agency is boosted. And there are adults who might undermine that agency, both teachers or parents or people around. Whenever that happened, during the time I was there was the idea that everything needed to be addressed. So we were inviting families, we were making agreements, we were helping them also deal with the frustrations, because I think this is a big part. We tend to, we have created this division in between school and home. Right, and most of the cases, teachers are saying that kids are not taught anything meaningful or values at home, and home is complaining that school teachers are doing this or that wrong. And I feel that there is a lack of communication, especially of compassion, understanding that it is hard to accompany young people, especially nowadays. So there was a lot of communication with families, with the families and parents who were fearful that their kids were going to fail, and our approach was simple. Failure is positive. If the kid learns how to take responsibility by failing and being surrounded by a supportive community, it's great. It doesn't have to be like everybody goes at the same pace, right? And it takes longer for others. But the important thing is that they get the tools to deal with the challenges. So we were trying to address that in order exactly to help them develop this agency that we can see in some of the graduates. I'm very glad about that. Very, very happy to see that.
Fantastic. I see the time. It is 3:30. So 3:32. So we need to free everyone to continue the rest of the day. I'd like to thank everybody who was here and the speakers. It's always so nice to come together and to have these moments. Maybe take for those who want, take a last opportunity to scroll through the chat and copy the different links that were shared. Derry shared a few important links, also his email address if you would like to email him in order to get a PDF copy of his latest book. And we shared a few times the different links to different desk resources and also to the Suvemäe movie. Thanks everyone, and hope to see you all very soon at some point somewhere, and especially at the UDEC conference early August 2025 in Belgium.